Hello and welcome to Not a Buffalo, the show where we discuss the science and technology that will save the world. My name's Jack, and I won't be mentioning the B word at all this podcast, and this is Ben, which is a lovely B word. Ben, how are you?
I'm very well, Jack. Do you think we should offer the listeners a prize if they correctly guess the B word that they can't mention and that we can't mention?
The Brie word. The Brie
B
word.
No.
Yeah, news stories about science and happiness. I think we have some. I
We
believe
do.
you have many, as is
I'm
usually
not,
the case.
I'm not going to say them all. I promise.
How many do you have? Because you said you had like a lot even after you got rid of some of them.
I've saved 20 and I've eliminated 3. But I saved these over the month. I just as I'm reading, I use an app called Feedly, and I just bookmark into. You can create boards in it, so I create a board for each month, and I just bookmark news stories into there, so I can go back and review them, and it works very well. But some of them,
a great system.
Some of them I bookmarked just because they were funny, so we won't go into these. But I think my favourite one is that monkeys outperform humans when it comes to cognitive flexibility.
Oh, talk me through that one. Because that's brilliant.
Well, basically, they set humans and monkeys a task with a reward at the end. And the task was essentially to move a square and then a circle. And it was kind of a trial and error thing. And if you did it in the right order, then a triangle would appear. And then you move the triangle and then you get a reward. So then what they did was they then ran the experiment again, except they made the triangle appear straight away. And almost all of the monkeys immediately used the shortcut. 70% of the monkeys went straight and moved the triangle. But humans didn't. Only 39% of the humans used the shortcut.
That's odd.
So basically, the monkeys just wanted the reward. And so they saw the triangle appear. So they immediately thought, okay, I'll just try and see if that is a shortcut. Whereas 61% of the humans continued following the rules that they'd figured out the first time round. And even after they saw a video of someone taking the shortcut, 30% of them still didn't use the shortcut, even though they weren't told, you're going to get less of a reward or it's breaking the rules to use the shortcut. They still wanted to follow the rules as they had learnt them the first time round.
That's really interesting. That's it's got a ring of Stanley Milgram about it. The guy who did the obedience tests back in the, whatever it was, 60s or 70s, something like that.
It's just, it's very interesting that humans clearly love rules. It'd be interesting to see if it wasn't scientists, if it was, say, a street performer or something who asked them to do something like this. Do humans just like authority, or do they like following the rules so much that they just won't try and get to the reward more quickly?
Yeah.
It's just very interesting. But basically, they said the study illustrates how humans can suffer from learned biases that leads us to make inefficient decisions and miss opportunities. I was just going to say, I just think it means that we are scared of people in white coats telling us to do things in case we get something wrong and accidentally make a bad science boom. But apparently it means less cognitive flexibility.
See, that was exactly what I was going to say, because the famous Stanley Milgram test about obedience, which is 65% of them would continue shocking. I'm going to explain the test in the first place. So they got someone into a room, in another sealed off room where they could hear stuff from, but they couldn't see into. There was someone who, every time they read out something incorrect, the test subject had to shock them. Now, they weren't really being shocked. It was just an actor screaming his lungs out, but of course, this had an effect on lots of people, but only on 35% who said that they couldn't continue to the end, whereas 65% would continue shocking, even to the point where the actor stopped responding altogether.
Sorry, even when they thought they'd put the punishee into a death, killed them or put them into a coma or something, they still continued to follow the orders and shock them.
Oh yeah, which is, that's dark. But then...
Yeah.
What is interesting about this is that's the baseline experiment. And that was when they were being instructed to do this by someone in a white coat. When the white coat was removed and everything else was kept the same, obedience drops to 20%.
Wow.
And 80% of people go, no, I won't do that.
And they still knew it was a scientist. Was it just the removal of the white coat, or was the role changed around slightly?
Nope, it was, for that one, I believe it was, everything's the same in the script and everything.
Wow, okay.
And what's even better about this is they scripted these 4 prods, as they called them. So they're still things like, you must continue, or the experiment requires you continue. The one which makes it most like an order, which is, you have no choice, 100% said, no, I do have a choice, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes it less or more dark, because when it's not an order, 65% of them were fine with it if a person in a white coat told them you should do it. When it was an order, even if it was someone in a white coat, then they refused, which is bizarre, because the takeaway usually from this is that, people like following orders. Actually, the takeaway from the experiments is, no, they don't like following orders.
Yeah, it's interesting. They don't like following orders, but it's more... So presumably when the scientists were saying, oh no, just continue on, if they did it in a softer tone, that still encouraged. It's like people like to be encouraged, but they don't like to be directly ordered.
It seems to be that way, and perhaps it's to do with them being invested in the process and just trying to be good participants.
Yeah.
Or trying to do their bit.
It kind of goes against Machiavelli's theory that it's better to be feared than loved, really, doesn't it? It's... I guess anyway, the positive thing that came out of this, as we always like to get something positive out of the story, is that humans, you should take opportunities and go for the shortcut to get the reward if you can. Take the chance. Step outside the box. Be the man or woman.
I have a story which is sort of equally upbeat about stepping outside of a box. If that box was kind of small in size and it contained a turtle. This is about as flimsy as science stories come. But
okay,
the Nikon Small World Photography Contest was won by a photograph of a turtle embryo, and it's really, really cute. Like, it's genuinely, like, it's ridiculously cute.
Wait, how do you take a photo of a turtle inside the egg, then?
You've got to get really close to the egg.
Do you have to use an ultrasound, though, or...?
I think it's actually that they stained the image to show up the different bits, because it's fairly translucent.
Oh, okay.
But it's by what they call microphotographers. So they photograph very, very small things. Like, they're the kind of people who photograph those sculptures which are done on pinheads that you see in the New York Museum of Art. Is that a secret hint as to where we live? Who knows? There are also like a bunch of other microorganisms being photographed as part of this. So there's 3 stentors, which I'd never heard of before, but apparently live in freshwater lakes and streams. They look like tiny shellfish, basically.
Okay. Well, send me the link, and I'll make sure to put some of them up on our social media feeds, and we can have a full visual engagement with our otherwise audio medium. Do I have a segue?
Now, oh yeah, segue from a turtle and lots of tiny photographs of tiny things, or large photographs of tiny things.
Large photographs of tiny things. I actually do have a great segue, which I've just lost. Where'd it go?
It's not here.
Yes. So speaking of photographs, Jack, I've got a challenge for you. I bet I can guess where you're from by how colours make you feel.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I know where you're from. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell anyone. But so this I just thought was a really interesting study because scientists surveyed 711 people from China, Germany, Greece and the United Kingdom, and they had 12 colours read out to them, and then they were asked which of 20 emotions the colours brought to mind and how strongly the colour was tied to that feeling. So the colours that inspired the most emotion were red, black and pink. Brown and purple had weaker associations. And there was some correlation, so everyone thought black was sad. They do say that people in Germany associated brown more strongly with disgust than any other country. So I think everyone thought brown was a bit disgusting, but Germany thought it was really disgusting. They really don't like brown. And people from Greece, in fact, Greece stands out quite a lot here. They were the only group to associate purple primarily with sadness, and they're the only country that didn't see yellow as positive. But China, Germany and the United Kingdom all saw yellow as positive. But one thing that I thought was interesting was black was associated with sadness across all countries, but white was rated as very negative in China because people traditionally wear white to funerals. So it's interesting that they associate black with, there's obviously lots of other sad things besides funerals. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But that's just a random visual medium story that I thought I'd throw in there based on your visual medium story, which is so delightful in an audio podcast.
Yeah. I have a question about that, though. Was this to do with the word that describes the colour, or was it to do with a photograph of something blue?
Yeah, the volunteers read out the word for the colour. So I think the volunteers just said green or red or blue, and then they asked the surveyees what emotion they associated with it and how strongly they associated that emotion with it.
It's interesting that there is such a difference. And I'd be quite interested to see like a gradiated map of, say, like across Central Asia or somewhere like that, of how that changes. Because I imagine as you get closer, the countries get closer together, you get a little bit more cultural overlap and a little bit more similarity in the way they respond to colours. Because I think that's sort of what we're looking at here. Yeah.
I just find how different cultures and languages and things develop just fascinating, especially when they're close together. Like, you have France and Germany border each other and they speak two completely different languages and have two very different cultures, very different in a lot of ways. Obviously there are some similarities, but I find that really fascinating. I mean, I can kind of understand, somewhere in China where you have a very different history and geography and climate and things like that being different to the UK, for example. But when two countries are similar enough together, it just and even in the UK or in Ireland or in anywhere where you have different accents and different kind of things happening just across very relatively small distances. I just find it really fascinating how we have these different approaches to things and different views of things.
Do you ever look at the accent maps they produced of the UK?
I think I have seen one of them.
There was one, maybe it was last year, but it made the news again, or it made its way into my version of the news, because it was the first time that Estuary English, which is the sound of Essex, had sort of reversed a little bit, because it had been spreading like anything all over the southeast of England, but it's sort of headed back towards the boundaries of its county, and a bunch of minor accents have made a bit of a comeback. Again, there's not really a clear model of why all this stuff is happening. It seems to be slightly random, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
I always like looking at stuff that's like that detailed and that visual, which is why I want this study to be scaled up so much. I want a full global map of like how people react to colours.
They haven't mentioned anything in the article about scaling it up, but maybe they will, and I'll keep an eye out for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I suppose I have to segue now, don't I?
Segue. Off a cliff.
Segue.
Into a story.
Yeah, but it's a story on the same level as the cliff, so it's more of like a walk across a plank to the same level of the tower block.
They're still segueing off a cliff. It's just
onto a safe landing. Oh yeah, of course. You're right. I'm riding a Segway. That's what's happening. Yeah, let's enjoy that image for a moment. As I enter the tower block and I turn to my right and I see a man who's perpetually drunk because his gut keeps brewing alcohol when he eats carbs.
I saw this story.
It's great, isn't it? I picked it up. I think I picked it up earlier this morning, like on my commute, and I was like, really?
I did the exact same thing. I saw it when I got into the office. It was one of the top headlines. Like, oh, I'm going to click into that. Maybe discuss that tonight. But go on, explain the story.
So essentially, it started with a cut to the thumb or an injury to the thumb, and then he developed symptoms of what they call ABS, which is auto brewery syndrome, which has got to be one of the best named disorders, because it actually says what it is. Auto brewery, I assume they mean auto as in self.
Is that a previously named syndrome? Like, has someone else had this, or did they invent that just for him?
I think it predates this gentleman. Okay. Yeah. There's a link in the one I'm reading to an article back in September, so it's been previously named, but probably not back when they were naming all of the stuff, because it's not known by a boring Latin name, which means red spots on a Tuesday. They're always meaningless names. They're always such meaningless names when you translate them from Latin.
Yeah.
Auto brewery syndrome, though, I like it. I wouldn't want it, but I like it. It's a rarely diagnosed medical condition where simply ingesting carbohydrates can be enough to make you wildly inebriated. Which sort of makes sense because you make alcohol from carbohydrates. It's quite the mutation.
So this was a mutation in his gut bacteria because of the antibiotics he took?
Yeah, you're totally right. It is because of antibiotics. So he had to complete a course of antibiotics for the thumb injury, and then within 1 week of finishing the meds, he reported experiencing uncharacteristic personality changes, including depression, brain fog, aggression, behaviour, and memory loss. Yeah, all of which are tied to being inebriated. And so he was. But yeah, he had blood levels equivalent to having drunk approximately 10 alcoholic drinks, which I don't think is a good enough estimate.
Yeah, is that 10 shots of vodka, or is that 10 weak ales?
Yeah, it turns out he has this rare disease, illness syndrome, wherein your body will just make you drunk. Part of me that just wants to leave in, we may have to cut out the bit about the bull. And cut out the rest.
I think you should. That'd be brilliant.
Okay.
Anyway, I can't remember whose turn it is to segue. It's my turn to segue, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, it is, because I did the drinking.
So, do you know who wasn't drinking, Jack? Speaking of drinking.
Me?
No, I'll segue into you much later, but...
Okay.
No, I was talking about Hazza al-Mansouri, who is the first Arab to go into space. He flew up to the International Space Station on the 25th of September and returned to Kazakhstan successfully 8 days later, and is the first Arab person to go into space, which I just think is a nice little story that we're still breaking these kind of milestones. We did the first all-female spacewalk earlier this month as well.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, I just like that NASA's kind of talking in a world that is seemingly becoming more divided. It's nice that NASA is still going, nah, just we want to create, like, you're all humans to us, and humans will advance space and the pursuit of humanity, regardless of whether they're Arabs or women or what have you. We want to be inclusive. So yeah, I just thought that was a nice little story.
What was the first Arab doing? Was he payload specialist or?
I think he was a pilot. Because he wasn't up there for very long. Like I said, he went up on the 25th of September, and he was only there for 8 days or something. But he was chosen from thousands of applicants. It actually doesn't give the purpose of his mission in the story I have in front of me. So I'm not quite sure why he was going up there. He took a family photo and a UAE flag.
Oh, that's a really nice story. I really like it when we break milestones like that as a species.
Yeah, so do I, and I also like that they always take in a version of their food, so that I like that they spend thousands of dollars, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, and enormous amounts of time researching how they can get astronauts' favorite food into space. So for him, they took in he wanted to take some Emirati food, which included something called balalit, which is sweetened vermicelli served with an omelette, that he was going to serve with the other astronauts. And I remember when the first Korean astronaut went into space, and they spent ages trying to figure out how they could take kimchi into space, because it was so important to the well-being of the Korean astronaut, because they literally could not go without kimchi.
Well, who can?
Kimchi is good. Kimchi is very good.
Kimchi's great.
What do you think of hyperbolic paraboloids?
I think they get exaggerated.
Yeah, so the only reason I actually saved this story is because they use really big words for something relatively simple.
Is it a molecule or something that's this shape?
No, it's origami.
Oh, okay.
So it's the headline is Hyperbolic Paraboloid Origami Harnesses Bistability to Enable New Applications. So for those of you who don't know, and let's face it, most of you shouldn't know. If you do know, then you're a bit sad.
I don't know what it is.
A hyperbolic paraboloid is basically a saddle shape. So a kind of a curve. So it curves. It has like a dip in it, but then if you look at it from the other side, it also curves over, like a saddle shape. I can't think of, if you've not seen a saddle.
Like what they think the universe might be.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, I think this shape could have a lot of really interesting applications. So by structural bistability, they mean that because the saddle can kind of reverse in on itself, it can provide additional stability in architecture and things like that, and that it also can be used in microelectronic devices. So really it's an interesting shape that they're exploring more. So the University of Tokyo and Georgia Institute of Technology are just looking into it, and I just really liked that they went for a really complicated, there's a lot of big words to basically mean yeah, if you bend stuff into this shape, then it does interesting stuff.
The first thing that my mind went to when you said architecture and saddles, I was like, I wonder if that's what dragon holes are for. Like, maybe the Feng Shui masters figured this out millennia ago.
Well, that's the thing. It's not exactly revolutionary. Like we know, I mean, it is a saddle shape, but we also, that's not too dissimilar. We have bridges and things. We know arcs and curves are very strong or unusually strong. It's not a huge revelation, but this is, I think, specifically because it has the dip and the curve in two ways, essentially, that it is more complicated. But the article continues, so they shorten hyperbolic paraboloid to just hyper, but then you get sentences
gotta
like,
be cool.
Exactly.
You've got to get down with the kids.
But then you get things like the hypertessellation with multiple stable states has promising applications as a stimulus responsive metasurfaces and switches. That sentence is going to appear in a Marvel film and it's going to save the world. It's going to not mean what they say it means.
I think that's what they actually do. So just like, I think we're gonna take a maths term and we're gonna take a science term and we're gonna make a thing in it. Probably how it does work.
At some point, they definitely, like, I imagine as a Marvel director or producer, is you go to a scientist and you say, I need you to explain this by science, and 4 hours later, the scientist is still trying to explain the basic fundamentals of why what they're asking doesn't even make sense, and they've just gone, you know what, I'm just going to take the 6 words I actually listened to, put them together into a sentence, and that's going to be in the film.
I always love the do you know the movie Sunshine?
I know the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I do not know the film Sunshine.
That's a wonderful film. But the film Sunshine is I think it's a Danny Boyle film. Brian Cox was the scientific advisor on it. Well, you can judge the accuracy of the science on this for yourself, Ben, because the main plot of it is that the sun has stopped working, and they're gonna go and restart it with a nuclear bomb.
Okay.
Exactly. Brian Cox was advising on that one. It's pretty good.
Advising
also,
or protesting and hence ignored?
No, he was actually doing advising. It was mostly for stuff like I've heard him talk about this, but it was mostly about the way people lived in space and how it affected their hair, and what could a good explanation for why the sun stopped working be, that kind of thing. So there was legitimate science within the movie, just not in the main plot.
How quickly would we die if the sun just stopped working? I feel like we wouldn't have time to put together a space mission to restart it. The Earth would surely freeze over pretty quickly.
Things would get pretty bad pretty quickly. There's no question about that, but it probably wouldn't be instant. This is totally off topic. There's a very good science fiction story called A Pail of Air, which kind of deals with this scenario, but in a much... Sunshine is a fine film, but it's not A Pail of Air, and The Pail of Air is a really, really good short science fiction story about life after the sun.
You know what? I was just going to recommend to you another science fiction trilogy which I'm reading, which is a very recent one. It's called the Broken Earth trilogy by a woman called N.K. Jemisin, and it won the Hugo Award. The 2016, 2017 and 2018, so she released the books 3 consecutive years and it won the Hugo Award each year, and it's brilliant. And it deals with, it's a very strange combination where I keep thinking she's going to get into the science and it's all going to be scientific explanations, but then it's not. There's magic involved, but she does a really interesting dichotomy between the science and the magic, and it is Earth, but it isn't Earth, and you're not quite sure, but it's I know you're not much of a science fiction reader, but I think you'd really find them fascinating. I finished the first 2 very quickly. I couldn't put them down, and I'm just reading the third one now, and I'm getting through it very quickly.
I'll have a look at that, thank you. I've just finished Book of Dust, volume 2, which was fantastic.
I'm not getting that until Christmas.
You read the first one?
I've read and actually the Broken Earth, I think if you enjoyed His Dark Materials and the Book of Dust and stuff, then you would enjoy the Broken Earth trilogy.
Your description of it being Earth but not quite Earth made me think of that.
So is the Book of Dust Volume 2 good?
Oh, it's great. If anything, it's better than the previous one, which
Really?
I didn't think was possible. Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that now.
It is just so good. Do you have any more stories?
No, I think I'm done, actually. I think those are all the main ones that I wanted to cover. I have one more quick story, which is they think they figured out how tardigrades survive the extreme situations that they find themselves in.
Oh, okay.
So tardigrades, and I love this, they have a protein called DSUP, which stands for damage suppression protein, and it's found only in tardigrades. But the thing is, they've been able to replicate it and test it in human cells, not on a full-scale human, just on some human cells, and it protects. It managed to protect the cells from X-rays. So, and it seemed to.
Wow.
From what I can see, it seemed to completely protect them. And this University of California San Diego team have discovered that this DSUP, I can't say DSUP protein because it stands for damage suppression protein, but this DSUP binds to chromatin, which is the form of DNA inside cells, and it forms a protective cloud that shields the DNA from hydroxyl radicals, which is what is produced by X-rays and causes the damage. And yeah,
That's
it's just
fantastic.
yeah, but it's really fascinating that tardigrades just produce this naturally, and it allows them to survive. They can survive in space. They can survive extreme temperatures. They can basically freeze to death or be blown up in a nuclear explosion. They can still survive it, and it's all because of this this protein, which somehow creates a cloud around the DNA within the cells and protects it. But it could have a wide range of applications, therapies and diagnostics and things like that.
Did the cells survive freezing by any chance?
I'm not sure they tried it. They bombarded it with these hydroxyl radicals, these X-rays, but they did try drying out the cells as well, and it protected them during that, because that's one of the things that tardigrades kind of are famously is that when they get really dehydrated, is they kind of go into this weird dormant state, and they can be revived from that, and this DSUP helps them in that situation as well.
That's nuts. That's fantastic, but it's also totally nuts that it's as simple as a protein. Like,
the cherry on top is that the paper is dedicated to a Professor Emeritus of Molecular Biology, whose name was Professor Russell Doolittle.
oh, that's great. That's even better. Lots of time in bushes, not doing much. That's great.
So yeah, that was my final little story, which I just thought was
That's
was
a really
cool.
nice one to end on as well.
And listeners, if you don't know what tardigrades are, then we highly recommend you go and look them up. I'm sure we've mentioned them on the podcast previously anyway. But yeah, they are
Tiny bears.
tiny little water bears. They are so cool. Thank you very much for listening to Not a Buffalo. Please subscribe to the show to never miss an episode, and rate and review us wherever you have the power to do so. We really do appreciate it. It really does help us out. If you'd like to get in touch, we are at Not a Buffalo Pod on Twitter, Not a Buffalo Podcast on Facebook, and you can contact us through our website, notabuffalo.wordpress.com. Bye.